We just talked about the Olympics because there was a transphobia, like an international transphobia happening toward Iman Khalif, but that's not what we're going to talk about today. We are going to talk about the Olympics. And I know, like, it's not super relevant to everybody. Not everybody cares. I'm not really hugely invested in the Olympics. It's just, I like it for the memes. And when you occasionally hear about stuff, it's newsworthy. It's more fun to me than when the Met Gala is trending. I'm like, I don't care about the Met Gala, whatever the memes, blah, blah, blah. Some interesting news has been coming out now that we're deep into the Olympics, or I think maybe even today they're doing closing ceremonies. So I've been seeing some really interesting news that I wanted to talk about around the health of these athletes. I think everyone considers Olympic athletes to be the most healthy a person can be, like at the peak of human health, the peak of human accomplishment. They're the best of the best. They probably have the best diets. They probably, take care of themselves more than anybody else, right? However, we're seeing a rising incidence of Olympic athletes collapsing with apparent, like, serious health episodes, which should be a concern for everyone because the thing that's making this happen is the thing that's affecting everyone globally. You know what a pandemic means? It means it's affecting everyone, everywhere, all the time, pretty much. They say, oh, it's endemic now, but endemic diseases have seasons where it comes and goes, and it typically only affects like certain parts of the population or maybe only in certain locations. But the waves of COVID seem to be pretty well, like, globally happening at the same time. And also, like, the lowest of the waves is like the time in between the waves, we still have like a higher than acceptable incidence of illness with COVID. And we're mostly finding this out through wastewater testing because mostly folks are not actually being tested. And hospitals, as of a few months ago, are no longer required to report COVID cases. So we have like these giant waves, like every 2 months or so, we're in the middle of a giant wave. We always have a big peak in June, July. There's a tiny bit of a lull in between. And then we have another big peak in August, September, October. And then it drops a little bit. And then we have another massive peak in December and January. And like February, March is like the lowest COVID incidence that we have throughout the year. And we're still dealing with like hundreds of thousands of new cases per week during that supposed lull. And yeah, so I know that you all probably are not excited to hear about COVID. Most people want to believe that the danger has passed, but it hasn't. And here's how you know, because I have 4 different Olympic athletes that I have an article about them collapsing at the Olympics. The first one here is Noah Lyles, which is probably the most high profile one, I believe. He is an American sprinter, and he was infected with COVID-19 like the day that he went for this run, which is like, that's dumb. Don't do that. Hey, come here. Listen, come here. Don't exert yourself when you have COVID. In fact, don't exert yourself for like as long as humanly possible after you have COVID too. Because the more you exert yourself, the more likely it is that you'll have long-term health complications. And I think that the WHO just released stats that like 400 million people globally have long COVID. You don't want long COVID. You don't. You don't want it. You don't. Promise? I promise? Listen to me. You don't want long COVID. So, Lyles. Apparently the media has been sort of downplaying this. He was expected to win gold and possibly set a new world record in the 200-meter sprint. He had just won the 100-meter race 2 days earlier, but shortly after crossing the finish line in 3rd place, Lyles fell down, writhing on the ground and visibly struggling to breathe. That's what this image is. He then got on one knee for nearly 30 seconds before medical professionals assisted him off the track in a makeshift wheelchair in front of a stunned global audience of millions. He returned a few minutes later wearing a mask and revealed that he had been sick with COVID for the previous 2 days. saying to a reporter, quote, "I woke up early about 5 a.m. on Tuesday and I was feeling really horrible." He later added, "I was quite lightheaded after that race and the shortness of breath and chest pain were definitely active." He then announced on Twitter that he would not take part in his final event the next day. This disturbing episode has upended the lies of Joe Biden and other world leaders that, quote, "the pandemic is over." In fact, COVID-19 is spreading like wildfire with no mitigations in place to protect public health. On Friday, the U.S. CDC updated its wastewater data showing that over 1 million Americans are now being infected with COVID each day. 1 million new cases per day. And this chart goes back to 2020. So basically, this is when we had the initial lockdowns and concern was in March 2020. And then, we kind of locked things down, got things somewhat under control over that summer. And then a huge spike over the winter, of course, almost as high as the first initial one. This was after the whole vax and relax thing. And then, we just keep having these huge spikes. Obviously, over the winter of 2021 was the highest spike. It was just completely off this chart. And again, this is off of wastewater data because when you have COVID, it's in your entire body and you carry some of it out in your waste when you go use the restroom. And this is true of pretty much all viral illnesses. I'm pretty sure you can test wastewater levels for other illnesses as well, like the flu. But this is just looking at COVID. So every year, twice a year, basically, we have these spikes that are exactly as high as the first incidence right after the announcement that hey, there's a pandemic and we need to start locking down and everything. So remember here, this is where schools were closed. Remember this? This is when we closed schools. I was in college right here during this. We went on break for spring break in March and they told us do not come back for the rest of the semester. And then schools were closed down over the year. And here we are now at the end of summer 2024 in another giant peak that is still rising, and schools are open. Nobody's wearing masks. No mitigation efforts whatsoever. And the Bridge Access Program, which provides free vaccines and free or reduced cost Paxlovid to people who are underinsured or uninsured, is about to expire. So I am actually tomorrow, as of this recording, tomorrow I'm getting last year's COVID booster because the new one is going to come out. I think in September it usually comes out, but it's going to be $100. I previously went to a pharmacy that was not enrolled in the Bridge Access Program and they tried to charge me $100 for it, or perhaps more. So honestly, if you're underinsured or uninsured, I recommend you get a COVID booster this month, even though it's not the updated juice that's about to come out. But if you can't afford $100, you need to get that free vaccination while you still can. Texas reopened schools in August of 2020. Yeah, smart. So smart. Hi, I'm Alexander and this is Mitternacht. You should hit the like button and subscribe and check out the Patreon. And ooh, look at this hoodie I'm wearing. It's merch. Check it out. Links in the description. Thank you. The vaccine should be free. It was made with taxpayer dollars. Yeah, you would think. You would think. Long COVID is disabling and being disabled sucks. Yeah. If you become disabled, guess what? Nobody cares about you. I'm disabled and I have managed to make it work working from home. But so I'm as functional as I can be. And that's because I can take breaks when I need to. I can't work a regular job for the most part because it pushes me beyond my capacities. And I feel sick all the time and I feel like all the time and I can't do anything at home and I'm really deeply unpleasant to be around because I have no energy. So yeah, sometimes I'm like, am I really disabled? And then I'm like, yeah, dumbass, you've curated your life to be as functional as you can be within your limits. Anyway, you don't want to be unable to work. You don't want to be in that position. Physics Girl on YouTube cannot get out of bed. She was perfectly healthy before her COVID infection. And now she just straight up cannot get out of bed. Apart from his own health, it's a real jerk move to do a race when you know you have COVID. Yeah, let me go compete knowing that I have a contagious illness. So this article continues, the onset of the pandemic forced the suspension of the 2020 Tokyo Olympics, postponed it to the following year, where testing, masking, and other precautions were then put in place. In 2022, the Beijing Olympics were held in a highly secure bubble set up in line with the zero COVID strategy then in place in China, protecting all athletes at the event. All of this, however, is now over. The Paris Olympics take place over a year after the World Health Organization lifted the COVID-19 public health emergency declaration, which is not to say that the pandemic is over, but merely that they're ending the emergency period, which I guess you can't live in an emergency forever, but basically from that point, it should have just been like, hey, all of these precautions are now normal. This is not an emergency situation according to that definition, but we're not reducing any of the recommendations. Every world government has scrapped all mitigations to slow the spread of COVID-19. What was once referred to as the Olympic spirit is effectively a dead letter. As with all modern sporting events, a tremendous amount of money is at stake in the Olympics for the athletes, their corporate sponsors, and the event organizers. Combined with the toxic promotion of nationalism, enormous pressures are now placed upon athletes to compete with COVID, regardless of the dangers posed to themselves and others. So yeah, that's one Olympic athlete who collapsed and then was unable to continue performing in the other races he was supposed to do, or the other event that he was supposed to do. We then had the French runner Alessia Zarbo, quote, feeling better after collapsing during 10,000 meter race. So she collapsed just before the 26-minute mark of the long distance race, which consists of 25 laps around the track. They claimed it's humid and quite sticky, and maybe the whole emotion of the occasion has got to her as well. This article says the exact cause of Zarbo's collapse thus far is unknown. Earlier in the race, another runner, Rahel Daniel, dropped out of the event, jogging off the track just 6 minutes in. Commentators said, well, that's surprising. She didn't look like she was limping or in any pain, so she just decided that her Olympic run was over. We also have this swimmer, Tamara Potaka. She reveals she collapsed after her race because, quote, I just couldn't breathe. She's a swimmer from Slovakia. She opened up about her frightening collapse poolside at the Paris 2024 Olympics. She collapsed on the pool deck after racing in the qualifying heat of the women's 200-meter individual medley event. The 21-year-old, again, Olympic athletes, there is a limited period of time in which you can be an Olympic athlete. You know, like it's a very youth-oriented thing. I mean, you know, aside from something like shooting, which, you know, there was that gray-haired guy from Turkey who obviously did well and won the silver along with his teammate in shooting. But most of these very physically oriented things, it's a young person's game. So we're looking at people in their early 20s, 21 years old, collapsing, unable to breathe because they're performing with COVID or with post-viral illness from COVID. So they put her on oxygen therapy, this swimmer. She improved significantly soon after oxygen therapy and the delivery of medication. The same day, she was discharged from medical care. She released a statement shortly after leaving the hospital saying, everything is fine. You don't have to worry about me. Thank you for your support. It was originally reported that she suffered an asthma attack. Slovakia's team leader Ivana Longe said in a statement that, quote, this combination of nervous and physical tension, while she did not have her inhaler immediately available to use, contributed to the creation of this problem. Sure. Oh, wait. So actually, she said Potaka took to social media to address the chilling moment and clarify why she collapsed. She said she did not suffer an asthma attack after the race. I told myself I would go all out and leave my soul in the pool, and that actually happened. Unfortunately, due to total exhaustion, I couldn't leave on my own, so they had to carry me on a stretcher. No, I didn't drop out or have an asthma attack. I just couldn't breathe and move my whole body. Adding that she's now, quote, fine. Shortness of breath? That's heart damage. That's lung damage. You can't breathe very well when you have COVID or when you have post-COVID illness. Like even a sickness where you don't have any symptoms, like if you have a 0 symptoms or a very mild illness with COVID, you can still have heart scarring. Because the thing is that respiratory illnesses like the flu, they basically infect your lungs and, you know, your airways and your mucus in your airways, and they only reproduce in that part of your body. They invade the cells, they use your cells to replicate the, like, more virus, right? COVID does that in your entire body. It can cause your body to just like lose all of its fat cells and it can cause brain damage because it's literally destroying your brain cells. Heart damage, lung damage, issues with your veins. It seems that it's doing telomere damage as well, which could be causing people to age faster. Oh, and also it fucks with your lymphocytes, which is part of your immune system. And hey, did you know that HIV fucks with your lymphocytes? So basically, catching COVID over and over again can cause enough immune damage that you acquire an immune deficiency syndrome. What is that? An acquired immune deficiency syndrome? That sounds really familiar. Oh, it's because it's AIDS. You know, same mechanism, same basic thing happening. People also are getting ill from things that are not COVID more easily. Strep throat was going around and like killing a bunch of children for a while. I actually haven't checked on that in a bit. I was just reviewing some of my old notes recently. And yeah, like strep throat, which is not usually a deadly illness, was killing young students for a while. Do you think COVID will ever get to endemic status? No. I'm like, endemic means it's only happening during certain times of the year with certain populations in certain places. But COVID is it mutates rapidly. Like let's try to find a chart of the most recent strains. This is from the Wall Street Journal. Like this is an older one from like 2020. Like this is how rapidly coronavirus mutates. And all of these different ones, like guess what? Your body, if you get sick with this one in November at Thanksgiving, and then you come into contact with this one at Christmas a month later, you can still get sick twice. Like with how rapidly it is evolving, the fact that it can dodge your immune system and the fact that it damages your immune system, I don't see how this is going to become endemic unless like we really seriously triple down on safety precautions, which we all should. Is like this is the one thing that I lament so much about being a small-time YouTuber, is that I wish I had an audience of like tens of thousands of people to tell this message. Wear a respirator. Wear an N95 everywhere you go. Whether it's indoors or outdoors, you can still get sick outdoors. You can still spread it outdoors. Make yourself a Corsi Rosenthal filter. Or even better, get like a UV light filtering air filter. Like the ones that they have in the White House. Get your updated vaccine, ideally twice a year. My concern is, what is this going to do for humanity long term? Yeah, I mean, we're not gonna have a good time. Like, okay, there's probably some amount of people who are relatively healthy still. You know, like if roughly 10% of new infections cause long-term health effects, that means that 90% of infections don't cause long-term health effects, right? But it seems like it stacks. So like if you get infected now, then you have a 10% chance of issues. But if you catch it again in 3 months, then you have like maybe more like a 15 to 20% chance of having negative health effects. So, I mean, I think what is going to happen is that we are going to continue to see mass death. We are going to continue to see mass disability, which we do not have the infrastructure to handle. The system already is such that, like, before COVID happened, the system was already such that if you needed disability benefits, you should expect that you're going to get denied the first time, and probably you're going to get denied the second time, and then you got to lawyer up, and maybe you'll get it the third time. But we do not invest money in helping people with disabilities. Jobs don't actually reasonably accommodate people with disabilities. You know, the whole you must lift 50 pounds thing, that's just a sneaky way of being like, well, we're not going to hire any disabled people for this job, you know? So I think long term, this is going to continue to have a cumulatively negative effect. Just get the lawyer first. Yeah, fair enough. Like, this is going to have long-term impacts on all kinds of industries that rely on precision and quick thinking. in order to operate well. It's going to continue to impact our politicians. Unless we, on the community level, make a concerted effort to create safe environments, I honestly think that this is going to be a huge contributing factor to the population loss that we're going to see over the next 100 or so years. Like with climate change alone, we're going to see a dramatic reduction in global population because there are going to be water shortages and food shortages and massive weather events and stuff. And then this is just sort of on top of that. There are more individual actions that you can take. I do want to just say also, it was this shooter, the one that everybody thought looked so cool, she also collapsed. She lost consciousness for like 10 minutes. I guess there's not a lot of details about that, but just wanted to, before I get too much further, there are individual things you can do to protect yourself. You can use a mouthwash with CPC in it that destroys everything in your mouth. So if you have a potential COVID exposure, that can help. You can take probiotic Streptococcus salivarius K12, which is shown to reduce the instance of illness even when you're exposed to bacteria and viral infections. You can also use a nasal spray with xylitol in it that also reduces your infectivity if you get sick. So it stands to reason that it reduces your viral, like if you come in contact with a virus, it could kill it in your mouth and nose and throat. So there are individual actions that you can take on top of wearing a respirator. But yeah, we're going to find a situation where only some people with like a very resilient body are going to be completely unaffected. Like, I'm not sure that we're going to have very many people, if any, that are completely unaffected, especially if we have unmitigated multiple exposures per year. But yeah, this is part of why I want to go live in the woods. Like, I want to go live in the woods and have a home gym in my basement and like go get groceries maybe once a week with my respirator on. And wearing glasses also protects your eyes a little bit because COVID can enter your body via the mucous membrane of your eyes. So you need mandatory vaccines covered with a free healthcare option ASAP. That's the only way to deal with yes, we do need good vaccines and they should be mandatory, right? But vaccines don't prevent you from getting sick. It's not like a magical ward protecting you from breathing in the virus, you know? It's a means by which to prevent you from getting severely ill. But we already know that even a mild illness with COVID can cause long-term or permanent health effects. So vaccination is like, yes, we should all be doing that, and it is important, but that's just to protect you from serious illness. It doesn't protect you from catching it. It doesn't protect you from transmitting it to someone else. You have to wear a respirator, N95, ideally, like sanitize the air as much as possible. I get these furnace filters, like furnace filter, and this is like the highest rated furnace filter that I can get. It used to actually say that it was rated for viruses on it, but it doesn't say that anymore. But yeah, if you get like, these are like $20 each. You can create a cube out of these and put like a box fan on the side of the cube, and it will suck in air and sanitize the air. It's called a Corsi-Rosenthal filter. There are more expensive air filters and like the ones with the UV sanitization, which would be a good option if you can afford it. But yeah, like if nothing else, I had like a visitor from out of town, a family member visiting from out of town recently. And I just grabbed one of those filters and I just leaned it against, like stuck it against the back of my box fan. Like there's a fire risk with that, and it reduces the power of the fan to just have like the filter stuck to the back of the fan. But it's still a Corsi-Rosenthal filter, you know? It still makes that impact. Well, and also remember everybody, there is such a thing as asymptomatic illness where you can catch COVID and have no symptoms. It's less and less likely now, but yeah, there are probably not very many people who are just like completely resilient against it. And even if you are resilient, yes, you are transmitting it to people who might not be. Yeah, I mean, if you put those filters in your actual furnace, then yes, that will help as well. But, you know, I personally find that in my house, the air filtration is not as good as it could be. Like, you know, the AC is in one part of the house, and then like there's like parts of the house that are pretty far away from it, so you're not necessarily getting all the air sucked in. So if I have a visitor from out of town, I'm going to put the box fan with the filter in the same room as us, so that we're not dealing with like, oh, I hope that this air is getting circulated through the filter in my furnace. Yeah, box fan filters, fire season in Washington. Yeah, the more fires we have, the more, you know, you should wear N95s outside for pollution and fire reasons as well. I guarantee you are not as healthy as an Olympic athlete. And Olympic athletes, we had 5 in this discussion today, 3 runners, 1 swimmer, and 1 shooter who collapsed to the ground unable to breathe properly. I guarantee you are not immune to that. With enough recurrent infections, guarantee you are not immune. It will hit you at some point if you continue to get unmitigated infections. Yeah, cover all of your orifices, just all of your orifices. And this is also why we should be strongly standing in opposition to mask bans, because it is unconscionable, the idea that you could be prosecuted for trying to protect your health by walking around with a medical N95. That's insane. Like, plan to do some civil disobedience if you live somewhere where there's a mask ban, because holy, that's the worst. The worst. Is this a new, more problematic variant? I don't think so. I just think that every version of COVID can cause long-term effects, and they all can damage your lungs and your heart. It's a cardiovascular illness with a respiratory phase is the problem. Someone asked earlier if we know if any vitamins can help combat COVID. We don't necessarily, but I have recently been seeing that there is new evidence that antiviral drugs that are used for HIV can be effective with treatment of long COVID. And one of my friends just recently mentioned, and I need to research it further, that PrEP, which is the preventative medication that you take to prevent yourself from getting HIV, PrEP might also be a component in helping you, like, prevent you from acquiring COVID. So I'm actually going to research that a little bit more. I don't need to be on PrEP for HIV-related reasons because I'm monogamous, but I might consider going on PrEP if there's enough evidence to suggest that it might prevent the acquisition of COVID. Because, yeah, it turns out HIV and COVID are not that different. They're a bit different in how they transmit, but, you know, if it helps you to be safer, you can think of COVID as an airborne HIV in that it will destroy your immune system. And just like the conversation with HIV, even one exposure is enough to permanently fuck you up for life, just like with COVID, same thing. And you should wear a prophylactic. Like if you're having sex with someone you don't know their status, you're going to wear a condom, right? So if you're around people whose status you don't know and nobody's testing anymore, so you don't know people's COVID positive status either, wear a prophylactic on your face. It's possible to even wear it at the gym. I wear an N95 at the gym where I do cardio and lift weights. There's like basically no situation where you should be completely unable to wear a mask. I'm beating a dead horse, but take it seriously, y'all. You are not as healthy as an Olympic athlete. Almost guarantee it. Also, there was one more. Malachi Mihambo received medical care following her event final. She's a long jumper from Germany. She exited the stadium in a wheelchair. So I now know of 6 Olympic athletes this year who collapsed and or were taken out by a wheelchair. What if I have a gap towards the top when I wear an N95? I buy the N95s from 3M that have a rubber seal. So it has a metal piece inside here, and you press it into your face, and it has rubber seal. So it seals really nicely. And it's one of the ones, they come flat, and then they unfold. So you smush the top part against your nose, and then the back part comes all the way back here. So it creates a seal against your goozle. And those, I think, are that's what I would recommend for anybody who can, like, I also have like a small face. Like, you know, a lot of these respirators are made for men with big, giant domes. And I have a pretty small face, and those 3M masks with the rubber seal up here that come all the way back here, and they also have the 2 rubber bands that go all the way around your head. They do not have the ear loops. Ear loops have a tendency to come loose right here. 3M Aura masks, yes. Let me pull up a picture really quick just to hammer the point home. These are the good. If you can get a P100, that's even better, but this is like, you can buy a box of these for like 40 bucks. Is the don't be closer than 6 feet for 20 or more minutes still good guidance? I think the social distancing guidance had mostly to do with the idea that it was water particulate droplets that you would breathe out. So that the social distancing guidance is for if you're not wearing a mask. But there is evidence to suggest that COVID is more of an aerosol as opposed to something that drops down to the ground within 6 feet. Like, and you know, aerosol, if you've ever seen like vape smoke in the air, like cigarette smoke or vape juice smoke in the air and how it just sort of lingers, there seems to be increasing evidence that when you breathe out, it's more like that, more like an aerosol. So the social distancing thing, I think, is mostly effective for outdoors when there's a breeze. And if you're like upwind from the other person, it's certainly not sufficient. Sometimes there's only so much you can do. If you do end up having to be closer than 6 feet to someone, then yeah, you should break out the xylitol nose spray, the CPC mouthwash, and honestly, if you were doing the probiotic Streptococcus salivarius K12 on a daily basis, it probably wouldn't hurt you any. Thank you so much to all my patrons, but especially Tiago Nascimento, Mersh Rovag, Jack, Amanda B., Michelle Frateroli, Michelle Winter, Wellington Marcus, Danielle McDonald, DZXN, Elavie Nobody, Pastel Infinity, Suzanne Maynard, Nova, Desi Quiche, Celeste, Athiette, Jamie Jam, Sojo, Bean, Kevin Young, Mr. Atheist, Liam Hodgson, Elizabeth Bartell, and Jericho.